Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me now. Please let me know in the chat if anything's wrong. I want to take a couple minutes to get my bearing and make sure everything is up and running and okay for you guys before I jump over to Tabletop Simulator. But just to give you an overview of sort of what this stream is going to be about, my sort of goal is to hop over, give everyone an overview of how the celebrity divorce case works. So just do some flybys, explain some of the unique mechanics. And then I'll start walking through how solo plays. I'm not really intending to do a full solo playthrough because I want to make sure there's plenty of time to answer questions if there are any. But I'll try to at least go through the motions so you get an idea of, what calling one witness would be against the Automa or AI deck would be like. I just may not play through the whole case to the very end to see who wins or not. I just want to go through and sort of show all the mechanics and all the unique things about not only the divorce case, but the solo case as well. So I guess this is the last chance, if anything is not working correctly, to let me know. We are multi-streaming, so hopefully it's working on all the platforms, both Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So whatever your preferred platform is to watch live streams like this on, they should all work. I did test the chat, so questions and pop-ups should be loading up into my window no matter what platform you're on. And I'll do my best to answer those while I'm going or while I'm playing, or have a section at the end where we can answer any final questions for anyone left. So without further ado, I'm going to hop over to Tabletop Simulator so you can sort of see what the game is set up like. And I'll stay in the corner there in case you want to see me. Okay, so I pre-set up the divorce case along with some of the solo cards. So first, I just want to spend some time going over the divorce case and sort of its unique mechanics. So first and foremost, we're missing a token, it looks like. Which one are we missing? We're missing a mind, so I'm just going to copy this and paste this here. So first and foremost, you'll notice that we don't have a jury. We have assets that we're competing over in this case. So the score, the amount of points that each asset is worth, is in the upper right. So the vacation home is worth 6 points, if I control it. And I guess I should pick a side. I'll play defense. So you want to score the most points in this, but there are a lot of factors that will change what a card is worth or an asset is worth, other than just the point value up in the upper right. You'll also notice underneath vacation home, sort of in the left there under the name, you'll see stocks and 8 points, sort of under it in small type. That's so you know what's on the back of the asset. One of the cool things about this case is you can play certain cards which will actually trigger flipping of assets. So if you're winning something like the vacation home, maybe you flip it and all of a sudden the bias values change and your points change. So that's an exciting thing that can happen as you negotiate through the assets of the celebrity divorce. You'll also notice there's only 10 assets. So 2 of the bias symbols are actually set off to the side. I just randomly set these up. And I didn't set them up correctly because this is a repeat. Maybe I forgot one in the bag. I did. There you go. So there's always 2 biases sort of left out before you set up, and that'll be important when you're deciding on your strategy and your starting attitude. But there are ways to swap biases in and out where you'll keep its position, but you'll change the sort of bias symbol that's on it for effects. So I'm actually going to go down and talk about. I'll show you the different attitudes you can have. They're obviously each sort of themed around each symbol or bias symbol. So we have prideful, spiteful, in denial, greedy, sentimental, and compromising. So when you play the divorce case, whether you're playing against the whether you're playing it solo or with another player, you'll secretly pick your attitude and your starting strategy. So but the caveat is, if I choose the strategy keep it civil, I have to pick one of the starting attitudes shown at the top. So I can't be spiteful and then choose the strategy keep it civil. That doesn't make sense thematically. So you have to pick the strategy will sort of somewhat give away what your attitude might be. But you'll notice that each of these attitudes will give extra points for claimed witnesses that have the symbol. And if you win the asset or share the asset with the symbol on it, it sort of becomes extra important to you. So when you're setting up and sort of deciding your starting situation, you're probably going to take into account those symbols and also the asset names themselves, because you'll see here on the strategy that when I pick a strategy, we'll both flip them over, and it tells us the key witnesses that we're calling. So there is some overlap with some of those key witnesses, which is interesting. So typically in a divorce case game, you'll have somewhere between 6 and 8 rounds, depending on if you have an overlap. There are some strategies that may both call, Alex Blake or something like that on this card. And in that case, just, you put out the witnesses that are there, and if there's overlap, it's no big deal. And then last but not least, the key assets, you go down the list and 1, 2, and 3, and you make sure those assets are face up. And then those give me additional assets that I want to go after. So, in the case of keep it civil, I want to go after the house, accessories, and the dog. And the house is worth a few extra points more than the other ones. But you'll actually go through, comparing it to the other one. This is sort of how it informs what's flipped up. So this is actually a good example because I can go through sort of an interesting rule thing here. So you can see that we would go through the things and make sure business was face up and house is face up. They actually are. They're the only 2 assets that always stay up, so they're actually always in there. And then cats has priority 2, so cats would be up before dog. Even though dog's on here, cats has a higher priority, so it would be flipped to cats. And then accessories and sports car would both need to be flipped up. So accessories is up, but yacht's private jet. Sports car, where's sports car? Oh, sports car is an accessory. So sports car is lower than accessories. So there's 2 overlaps. Accessories would stay up because it's higher on that strategy list. We have a question. So can the automa for solo be used for all the cases from both seasons? Yes, it can. So I've pre-set out some of the automa cards for this case. So I'll zoom in on those right now just to show you. Each case has a card like this, which has a victory effects and a questioning step on its side. And it tells you the case number in the upper right that it's based on, and the effects are tailored to that case. So for example, case 1 has a prosecution side, a prosecution card for case 1, and a defense card for case 1, because the effects around prosecution for the murder trial in the original game, the prosecution needs to lock biases, so they have a lot of effects that lock. And if you're playing the automa when it's defense, they need to unlock those biases. So they have their own questioning victory effects card that you would swap in based on what you're playing versus what the automa is playing. The personalities, I've chosen here the Napoleon complex, they give you a unique sidebar action, and they are usable in all cases. So every personality can be used in every case. So you can create different combinations, and you can make more challenging solo cases. I'm sure there's certain combinations which make things a bit more challenging or different, but that's certainly a way you can mix up playing cases solo and replaying them solo. Last but not least, we have this deck of right now 5 different cards which give you pass conditions and discovery conditions. And this is sort of how the automa acts when they're drafting. So one of the things the original game solo mode didn't have was you just discovered the whole case by yourself. So you just gave the automa every card you didn't want. You buried any cards you might want to get later, and you took all the best cards for you. We think it's a lot more interesting and a better way to simulate a true two-player game by having these restrictions when you draft during discovery. So I'll get to that in a little bit when I start walking through how to actually play. But basically, you roll the dice. You roll this bias dice and any d6 that you have with the game. And it'll tell you how the automa is going to act in that discovery process. It basically just gives you a restriction to work around. So, the automa takes the card worth the highest value. If I rolled that one, it's the automa takes the card with the most bias symbols on it. And the number that I roll on it will tell me how many rounds the automa will do that. So basically, it's sort of restricting the cards, and it's saying, of these 3 cards, I can't pick any 3. One of the cards is sort of taken away from me because of the automa's action. And it represents a better way of having to actually work to draft the case, I think. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Moving on to the divorce case, going back to sort of setup. So you'll choose a strategy, and you will choose whether you're male or female in the marriage. These cards will typically be, this will be one card that's double-sided. It's easier to import stuff all at once with Tabletop Simulator, so it's not double-sided. So I could pick to be, female Adrian McKenzie or male Adrian McKenzie, and my opponent could choose whatever they want. And then I would secretly choose my strategy and my attitude. And then pretty much you play the case as normal. Then you'd go on to discovery. So I'm actually going to start setting things up here. One of the things I do want to mention, though, that's interesting about this case is there will be a variant or some rules, or you can decide amongst yourselves that you can try to play the divorce case cooperatively, meaning that you're trying to get as equitable a split between the assets, as equitable in score as possible. So, things like your attitude will have to stay secret, but you can sort of communicate to your opponent and try to keep, you can work together to keep these things in the middle. But the thing about it is you won't be allowed to share your attitude, and your attitude and the witnesses you're claiming will slightly change those points. So you'll need to work together to try to become victorious, in a cooperative game, and we'll have different score gaps where you can sort of see how well you did. Obviously, if you can perfectly get it, to be like 30 to 30, that's like the best outcome you could have. But if you're within a couple points, I still think that's quite good. So we're still working out what exactly those points will be. Okay, so let's get into setting up the divorce case for a solo game. First things first, we're just going to choose, we're going to randomly choose a strategy for the prosecution, and we're randomly going to choose an attitude for the prosecution. We'll keep the attitudes nearby just in case you can draw additional attitudes and potentially get more scoring opportunities. And there's ways where you can swap out your attitude. Your attitude can change as the case goes on. So you may start out prideful, but then you can shift to be compromising or greedy later on, based on a card draw. The other thing you will do when you set up for a solo game is you will take, I don't know what we're calling these, the discovery cards, the discovery and pass conditions cards, and you will pick one. Basically, you have to build the automa's personality. So there's a lot of different factors where you can play, the same case with different personalities and discovery conditions. But basically, you choose one of these cards. You choose a personality card, and these personality cards are double-sided, so you have plenty of personalities to choose from. And then you load up the correct questioning card for the case you've chosen. The divorce case just has one because the defense and prosecution are basically trying to do the same thing. It's a more symmetrical case, but most of the cases in Lawyer Up have both a prosecution questioning card for the case and a defense questioning card for the case, depending on, what the Automa is playing. So you'll have to make sure you have those right cards. You will give the Automa their solo deck. This is one of the things that comes in the solo expansion. It's basically a revised solo-focused version of the base deck that you always play with. We've punched it up a little bit, so the Automa has a slightly stronger base deck than typical player would, but a lot of the effects and card names are the same and do approximate what should happen in a two-player game. Again, it's all to make the solo game to be a closer rendition or representation of the two-player game as a whole. And then you just need the 2 dice you're going to use sort of nearby. So I'm going to choose my strategy. Let's say that I want to be the primary caregiver, and I'm feeling sentimental about our marriage. And I will be the female Adrian. We'll set these just over here. And Adrian and Sam are always witnesses in the case, so we can put those nearby. Normally this would be hidden from the other player, but I'm playing solo, so there's no harm in leaving it face up. And now we're going to flip over the prosecutions, and this will just help us set up the game. So we have Sam, Howard, and Adrian are always first. Then, here I should go in here. We have Maki Soto, Jeremy Howard, and Savannah Howard on this side. I've got Kingston, Rebecca Lord, so those first two are going to be with me, and I also have Savannah, so there's an overlap. We're not going to have her. Savannah will be one of the witnesses. We don't have any of these other people, I don't think. Maki Soto is also one of the witnesses, so we'll move these witnesses around here a little bit just to have them visible. And I'll shuffle the witness deck in case there's any surprise witnesses throughout the case. Here's the solos. Here's the Automa's attitude. Here's all our witnesses for the case. Spread out. There's our witness deck. And then you'll notice on this strategy card that there is a effect at the bottom. You ignore those for the solo. So there's like things about going after certain key assets. You can see one mine after you call a witness. If I'm winning 2 or more of my key assets, I may perform the called effect of the current witness at additional time. So, I will have that ability to go after those key assets, but they're not super important. So it's not something we're going to bog the Automa down with in this particular case, especially since they have a pumped up base deck anyway. Okay, so we've set up the witnesses. Now we'd start playing the game, and we would do the drafting phase. So again, the way drafting works when you're playing a solo game is you're going to roll both these dice, and I'm going to perform the effect. So the effect is the Automa buries the card with the fewest bias symbols on it. And I'm going to do that for three rounds of drafting. So when I draw my 3 cards, the Automa buries the card with the fewest bias on it. So the fewest bias is going to be this red card here. So they're going to bury that. I'll put the buried there. And then now I'm left with 2 cards that I can draft sort of as I see fit. So I can take the gossip blogs, which are scandalous. That's one of the things that evidence is marked with in this case. If you go the scandalous route, those cards are powerful, but there's sort of negative aspects to them because you're using the tabloids and things like that in the divorce to sort of be spiteful. Or I can take the board game collection. I'm actually going to take the board game collection because the Automa is strong, triggering off of bias symbols, which you'll see a little bit later. On average, are the games shorter or longer with the solo mode compared to player versus player? I would say that in general, solo the cases vary by length more than playing solo or player versus player does. Everything takes longer in Tabletop Simulator than in real life, in my opinion. But the solo mode, if you're playing the divorce case, which is a somewhat shorter case with less witnesses, it's about the same whether it's two player or solo. I mean, it really depends on you. I mean, solo may be a little faster just because, you know, you're fast or you're not waiting for someone else to make their turn. You sort of planned it out a little bit more. But you know, that's my perception, is that they're about the same time. They're not. A bigger difference is like the murder case has 9 witnesses in it. It's one of the longest cases. The private eye case, as an example, the Godfather case from the first season, this case are shorter than that one by a decent amount, by several witnesses, several rounds of witnesses for sure. So I'm not going to bore you with drafting the whole deck of evidence here, but I'll at least do 3 rounds and show you how it changes up. So again, the automa is still taking the card with the fewest symbols on it and burying it. So this 5, even though I probably won it because it's worth so much influence, it only has 2 bias symbols on it. So it's buried. The automa buries it. Now I have these 2 cards to work with, and I'm going to take a card that is worth 0 to me, but is a good link. And I'm actually stuck now giving the automa a card of their color worth 3 influence. So again, this is where I think the new solo mode makes solo play a lot more interesting. You're not drafting the whole thing. The automa is restricting your draft in some way. So this would be the final round with that same condition. Again, I'm looking for the fewest bias symbols. If there's a tie, I can choose. So I will choose to bury that one because I'm going to keep this 4 for myself. And then I will give the automa the sports car. So now that I've done that 3 times, the automa would change its discovery conditions, and it would change things up on me. So we'd roll these dice, and now for the next 3 rounds, the automa is burying the card with the most bias on it. The automa can take, meaning it gives it to itself. It can give to you, or it can bury. So it can do all 3 things. The effects just sort of define what those things are. So for this one, it is now burying the card with the most bias on it. So it's going to bury this one. And I'm going to take this 4. That's neutral. And I would give them a blue 2, which is my color, which, helps me a little bit more. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to randomize the rest of the draft just for speed's sake. So I think everyone gets a sense of, let me know if there's any questions, but hopefully that was a good overview of how the automa drafts and how it works. So now I would take my base deck and I would shuffle this together just like a normal game. I have 3 objectives, 3 objections, and a sidebar token. The automa also has a sidebar token and 3 objection tokens. And their evidence will be shuffled into their base deck. The only difference is that the solo player has their own base deck geared towards them. And I put this sidebar token above the personality because that's when I check to see if the automa player will sidebar me. That's a good way to check. Okay, so now we're all set up. We would enter the trial phase. The automa in this case, and this isn't on the cards, but every case that you're playing solo, there'll be a solo rulebook that lays out how the automa likes to sway jurors, or in this case, it's assets. But again, each of our cases has a different juror setup or swaying setup. If you're playing the witch trial, you're swaying from the mob. If you're playing the divorce case, you're swaying assets and not jury members. And then other cases have jury members. So each case will have a rulebook example for the solo mode, and which will lay out how the AI wants to sway things. And I actually put these notes for myself from the rulebook up here on the notepad of Tabletop Simulator. And the AI sways the asset that's not on its side currently, that's worth the most points first. Then if there's a tie, it goes for the cheaper asset as far as influence spend goes. And then after that, it goes for the asset worth the most points that it can afford. And the AI always tries to spend all of its influence points when it wins a witness as best it can. The AI, there's also rules in this case for how the AI calls witnesses, and it's pretty easy. You just follow the key witnesses from top to bottom on their key witness. So they call Sam Howard, then Maki, then Jeremy Howard, then Savannah. So prosecution still starts. You can see that the judge is on the prosecution side. So they're going to start by calling themselves. One of the things we've done in the solo case is you try to do the called effects for the AI if you can, just to make things more thematic. The big exception is that the AI does not have a hand of cards. So if there's anything that's like draw 2 cards, discard a card, you ignore those types of effects, but otherwise you try to do the effects as best you can for called effects and victory effects as well. So in this case, the called effect is draw 1 attitude, then discard 1 attitude. So what we would do is it would draw an attitude, you'd shuffle it, and then it would discard 1. We don't know what that attitude is, but it might have changed now from what it was originally dealt. And I guess we should set this to 5. And we're at 2. Move the buried evidence up a little bit so it doesn't interfere with chaining things together. I'm actually going to move this AI stuff down as well so we can put cards better flip them out from the witness. So the AI doesn't have, so the first thing you do once discovery is finished and you've entered the trial phase, this discovery card you can flip over and it has the AI's past conditions on the other side. And what I like to do is use the D6 and just place it on that card and place this die on this card, because that's sort of how it works. This die is for this card and this die is for this card. And then the sidebar corresponds to the personality basically. And the first thing you do during an AI turn is you decide what action they're going to take. And the core actions of the game are the same as they were before. A player can pass, they can play a card into their examination, they can play a procedure, they can activate a procedure. So the AI has a quick checklist where they like to do. First, when they first call a witness, you can't pass as your first action, so we can skip that. But you do want to roll this dice because as the player, I want to know what their past condition is. So their past condition is the automa has at least 1 procedure in play and has exhausted their sidebar. Otherwise, the AI will never rest. And that's important because one of the only rule we changed since the original game came out is we have changed the pass rule. We found that having bad beats or just being unlucky with card draw was one of the biggest downsides of the game and really took away players' agencies about which cards to save for which witnesses and things like that. So the new rule is that once either player passes, the other player has 1 more examination action, meaning they can play 1 more card into the examination to generate influence before the witness is resolved. I'm pointing out that it's an examination action because if your opponent passes on you and you have a bunch of procedures in your hand, that's great. You can take 3 actions and play those procedures down in a row and just get them equipped for future witnesses. But you can only play 1 more card into your examination, which is important. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because the automa is only going to pass if they have a procedure in play and they've exhausted their sidebar, which means they're going to keep playing cards and they're going to go pretty hard at this particular witness because I rolled a 6. So I want to keep that in mind based on my hand draw and deal with it accordingly. Okay, so the AI won't pass this turn. The next thing you do is you check the procedures it has in play. The automa doesn't have any procedures in play, so we can skip that. We don't need to worry about that one. the sidebar, it does have its sidebar, and we can read here that if the automa has less cards in its examination than the player, it will sidebar, hence Napoleon complex. It does not have less than us. We have the same amount of cards in the examination, which are both 0, so it would not sidebar. So the last thing it does, if it doesn't do any of those other things, is it plays a card from its deck. So we flip this card over, and we see what we have. So if we have a card from the case at hand, meaning it's an evidence card with the case stamp on it, like this one is, what we do is we actually use this. This is where rolling the die comes into play, and we trigger, obviously the AI gets its 3 influence, but then it has these 3 symbols on the card. So we're going to roll the bias die, and if it hits one of those symbols, it would trigger the corresponding effect. Lucky for me, it hasn't, so it just got 3 influence from that. It did not get an examination effect. The solo cards, which are this pinkish purple color, they all those examination cards effects do trigger and fire. So if I were to flip over one of those cards, it would absolutely, we just sort of read and do what it says. And the procedure cards from its base deck can come up as well. And those procedure cards just go out and play and set up that AI turn that I just walked you through. Okay, I guess I should draw cards from my hand here and see where I'm at. Wow, not great. I drew 2 cards which are going to generate 0 influence for me here. But I am down by a lot of influence. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm thinking about, can I discredit the witness? I'm going to start by discrediting the witness, which will give me 2 influence, and it will cancel the primary value of this, taking 5 influence away from the prosecution. Now, I should note that the prosecution has 3 objections. The rule we have for the way the automa objects is that they object if your argument generates 5 influence or more. So that was only 2 influence, although technically it's sort of a gray area because I did take 5 influence away from Jeremy Howard. But it's sort of at your discretion to play those objections with the automa however you'd like. I'm going to play the strict rule we have written, which is if I play a card that generates 5 influence, it objects to me. But when I do trickier plays like that one, it does not. Okay, we have a question here about the pass rule. Can it be abused by someone with high value influence cards and the other who has small influence cards cannot build up their chain? So yes, I mean, there's still luck involved in this game with the cards you draft and the cards you draw. So I would say that the important thing to do about the agency of the player is if you have big influence cards, you want to try to play them as soon as possible because you want to make sure you get those points into your examination. If you hold on to them and your opponent passes, you have 1 chance to play 1 more of those cards. So if you have a lot of cards with small influence numbers, you want to try to get as many of them into the examination as possible. But if your other opponent is just coming out with big guns, you may want to pass to mitigate that damage. The way witnesses are called and the way people open up who starts with the witness, I think it creates really interesting decisions when you play the game more now with when to pass and when to keep going. So, I would say yes, I guess someone could abuse it, but they don't know what you have in your hand. So you could be holding on to a big influence number. When Sam and I play, if we played a lot with the new rule, obviously, we're scared to pass if we're only up by 5 influence because there's so many cards that can boost influence and get you 6, 5, 6 plus influence and tie the witness or win it as the last word. So, we tend to only pass if we're up by 6 or so. But, and sometimes we pass when we're up by 3 and we end up winning because we guessed right and the player doesn't have a lot of other cards. But it's scary when you're playing an opponent who has a full hand of cards to pass because there's probably a lot of choices that they still have. Passing against an opponent that has 1 or 2 cards, maybe they can't match them. That's where I think all the strategy and the intrigue sort of happens now in the game. Okay, let's play through this witness, and then we'll open it up for any final questions. And I think that'll be a good overview of the divorce case. If everyone likes this sort of stream thing, I'm more than happy to go through some of the other cases that we have in Tabletop Simulator as well, or to play through a full solo mode if that's super interesting to people as well. But let's go back to the AI's turn and show you the solo turn again. So we're going to check their pass condition. They haven't met it yet. They don't have procedure, and they still have their sidebar. We have the same number of cards in examinations. So, it's not going to sidebar either. So then, of course, what is it going to do? It's going to play another card into its examination. And that is a legal argument, which is +2 value for each legal bias symbol in its examination. And you'll notice that this is, there's legal arguments in my deck as well, but it's worth 0 influence, plus each symbol. So that's 4 influence for the prosecution. So it's got 2 on the card, and then it's getting 2 for each of those symbols in its examination. Luckily, it doesn't have too many, so it's going to go back up to 7. So now it goes back over to me, and I am in trouble. I can't play my 4 because I did that. So I would probably pass. I mean, I could try to. Actually, let's object. So we'll spend an objection. We'll object to their thing, and we'll see what the next card is. It's an emotional argument. It is worth exactly the same. So it didn't really help me at all. I could sidebar, or I could try to continue my chain by playing some of these other cards. And let's just do that just to make this last a little longer, we'll do this. So this has an examination effect. Sway yacht or gain the judge's favor. I will sway yacht to my side, because that's worth 2 influence to me and 7 points. That's worth 0 influence to me, though, so it's still 4 to 7. It goes back to the Automa. They're not going to pass. They're still going to play a card. Oh, look, here is a procedure card. So they're going to put that procedure out in play. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this for 4 to take the lead. If there are no scandalous cards in your examination, sway 1. I don't have any scandalous cards, so I can sway a mind. And I want to generally take the one that's worth the most points to me. So I'm actually going to sway the accessories because it's one of my key assets that I need. And I'm actually winning the witness. But this is a good example because I've set up what the Automa will do on their turn. And first, we're going to check their pass condition. It does have a procedure, but its sidebar is not exhausted. Then we check its procedures in play. The recess says if the Automa has the judge's favor and is not currently winning the witness, discard all cards in both examination. The player gains the judge's favor and discards this card. So on the Automa's turn, they're going to trigger their procedure. And they're going to do this, flip the judge over to my side, and they're going to discard all the cards in the examination, wiping those points out because they're not winning the witness. So that'll take this down to 0 versus 2. Okay, so the only card I can play is this for 3. I mean, I could sidebar, but I'm going to play this for 3, see if I can win this one. And the Automa's not going to pass. They don't have procedures. They haven't used their sidebar, so they'll play a card. That is worth 0 influence for them. But we are going to roll this dice to see if they trigger an effect. They do get the mind, so we would need to refer to this questioning card. And it would get plus value if at least was bias on the card matches the previous card. It does. It would get plus 5 value. So that does fire. Luckily, it's a blue card. If that was a red card or a neutral card, the Automa would have just gained 7 influence points, and I would have been in deep trouble. So it goes back to me, and I'm going to pass. So this will be the Automa's last turn, and the Automa is going to play 1 more card into its examination. The previous card is evidence, so it's going to get +3 value. And it's going to get 5. So we have tied influence here, but I have the judge's favor. So I am going to win that witness. So I would take the witness. Well, first I should resolve any victory effects. +2 influence for each other card in your examination. I don't get anything from that because it's the only card in my examination. And then I draw 1 attitude as my victory effect. So I can take from the attitude deck, I actually have 2 attitudes now. I'm conflicted emotionally, and I'm both in denial and sentimental currently. So I actually want to go after assets of either of those colors because they will actually help me. These cards can go in their examination. I do take this witness in my claimed witness pile. And since I won the witness, we flip the judge to the opposition side and refresh their sidebar. And the Automa would call the next witness as well. So we'll do 1 more because I'm having fun, and I want to show the sidebar action is really what I want to do. So that was the first witness. So sort of round 1 done. We would move on to the next witness. The Automa is going to call based on its strategy. So the next witness there is Maki Sato, and we'll get into the Maki Sato is like the co-founder of the billionaire social magnet company that Sam Howard started. So when she's called, you sway 1, I forget what we call that bias symbol, like judicial, bureaucratic, unless your opponent discards 1 scandalous card from their hand. So to draw my hand. And I have a chance to discard any cards I didn't play, and obviously I would discard a card that's not my color. I don't have any scandalous cards, so the AI would sway 1 of these that's worth the most points to them. So they would sway business to their side, since it's worth the most points. So they did that. They swayed 1 of those, since I couldn't discard a scandalous card. And then they would do the same. We would roll their pass condition. They're not going to pass on the first turn, but this time they're going to pass if the player has 3 or less cards in their hand and the Automa is currently winning the witness, the Automa will pass on their turn. And then we should take this down, bias down. So the Automa will play their card. It is a counter argument, and it is worth 2 points. And here's where things get interesting. This effect, to simulate sort of what it does in a 2-player game, is the player discards an argument from their hand. So because the timing of the Automa to like play that right after you played an argument, it can't decide what card to play. This card is sort of forcing me to get rid of an argument from my hand. I'll probably get rid of Greater Good because it has very few symbols I can match. And then is Family Photos in play? It is not. That's a good one. I can't play it. I can't match symbols. So yeah, I'm going to play Charming Demeanor because this is one of the cards that actually has become much more powerful with the new passing rule because it allows you to take another action immediately after. So I'm going to take the judge on my side, get 2, and then I'm going to play Address the Jury for another 2 to sway a bias. And that's important because I can get, I can move a bias symbol that's worth big points. So I could move this to 5 to get 10 points, which I probably will do that. The house, I'm predisposed to get the house. The prosecution's predisposed to get the business because Sam Howard founded the business, whereas I sort of bought the property to build the house on, as far as the flavor text of the story goes. So you'll sort of notice that's depicted by these swaying numbers and symbols. There's two blue spots for the house for me and 2 red spots for the business. Similarly, these 2 down here are the same, whereas these ones in the middle have that middle spot. So they're more equitable assets between us. Okay, so the Automa is going to play a card because they don't have a procedure out. It's going to be 3. We're going to roll this and see if I get one of those symbols. I do not. Actually, would the Automa have passed? Well, too late now. Forgot to check that. The Automa would pass if I had 3 or less cards in my hand and was currently winning the witness. So it would have passed, actually. I shouldn't have played that card. I don't want to mess up. So now I have one more examination action left. And I would be able to win this witness with either card. I'd probably play Family Affairs because it is, this could be comboed to be better, this moral argument. So I would win by 1. Victory, draw 1 procedure from either player's discard. So I could draw that procedure that they had in play, but I'm not going to go through with that because I want to get off this stream and get to any questions we have. But I would claim this witness. I'm doing a lot better than last time I played in this. Victory effect doesn't have one. It has a defeat effect. I did fail in showing you the sidebar action, but what are you going to do? And then I would have only 1 influence to spend here. So I could get the accessories over to my side. And then we take it back down to 0. And the Automa would call the next witness. But that's a quick overview of the divorce case. So I'll stay on here. I don't know how many people are still around watching, but if anyone has any other questions, I've done a pretty good job answering them as we've gone. Please feel free to chime in. You know, for all of those who have backed us, we are funded on Gamefound. So thank you for that. This is the first time we've done a crowdfunding on Gamefound. So we're glad you followed us there and you're interested in playing more Lawyer Up. And thanks for watching this stream and asking your questions. Hopefully this video has done a good job of demonstrating 2 things. 1, hopefully it's demonstrated how unique the divorce case is. I mean, that's one of our goals. Every time we design a new case, we really want it to be as unique as possible and make sure we're giving you something new to enjoy and play with. We want it to feel not necessarily like a new game, but we want it to feel like it has something novel and memorable that you can remember the case by. And then the second thing we wanted to address is, we've heard everyone's feedback about the solo mode in the original game. And, hopefully this has demonstrated how much thought and effort we put into expanding that experience and making it a more in-depth and soloable game to do. So we do have one question here. I have one question. I would love to get a big box where all the Lawyer Up content can fit into. Yes, we're well aware of that. Part of the reason we didn't offer a big storage solution is because I've learned from the past that doing that is very difficult because you never know when the content is over. I tried doing that for Maximum Apocalypse and we did a huge box and I'm pretty sure it's pretty full with our most recent Kickstarter. When that comes out, it's going to like barely squeeze all into it. And it really limits what you can do. Whereas I know for a fact that we have a lot of other Lawyer Up content and cases planned. So planning out the size of the box was just something we wanted to wait down the line a little bit more, where we could have a clearer picture of how big that box needs to be. We've seen the feedback in this campaign already, and we are going to look into, some people have said they would prefer to get all the season 2 content in a bigger box. So I think that's something that's legitimate that we can look into. We can look into, for Kickstarter backers, instead of producing all the small little boxes, we may have an option in the pledge manager to select a big box that's just season 2 as a whole, the all-in season 2, maybe a complete box in and of itself that can be a little bit larger, more like a Fantasy Flight living card game size box, where hopefully you can fit all the content up into this point into it. And then if season 3 or 4 down the line come down the line, we can look at a huge box to store everything, or we can sort of stick with more of a standard size box where each season would fit in. So hopefully that answers that question. We are looking into it. No promises yet, but I think that's reasonable, especially since most people are pledging for the all-in season 2 content. We can just sort of create a unique product around that. Any chance we can PNP the solo cards to play it earlier with season 1 before season 2 delivers next March? Yeah, I'd be happy to eventually get around to uploading season 1 stuff. I'm a little unfamiliar with Gamefound and how the updates work, but I think we can create a locked season 1, update for people to download it. At the very least, we could send out keys on like itch or something to download the solo expansion and put it up on there somehow. We also can work at putting it on Tabletop Simulator for people as well. There's always little things like that to do, which I overlook. So please keep reminding me to do that, because that's one of those things I will forget to do. Okay. Are there any other questions? I'm happy to answer anything else. If there's any final questions. Thank you everyone for coming and watching the stream. If there's anything else we can do for you, please feel free to comment on the Gamefound campaign page as well. Some of these ideas that I'm already talking about are from backers giving us that feedback. And we do our best to listen to feedback and do everything we can to address your concerns and problems and things like that. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully I'll get a chance to do another one of these. I'm hoping to find someone to play the private investigator case with. So hopefully we can get on the schedule as well. And we'll put that on, basically the cool thing about Gamefound is that live stream box at the top of the page. We can hide that now since we don't have a live stream coming up. And then when a live stream is scheduled again, it may pop back up. So I guess the moral of the story is if you're interested in this kind of stuff, make sure you're checking the campaign page regularly, because we may be popping up other streams, live streams like this to go over the game based on your feedback and based on times and things, we can sync those up. So I think that's it. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll make sure this is put up on YouTube and everywhere else so you can watch it. If you missed it live, you can watch it later. Just make sure you put the comments on the campaign page and not wherever you're watching the video, because we probably won't get to those comments as fast as we will on the campaign page. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks for your support. And, here comes season 2. Court's in session.